The defenders of the besieged Ukrainian port of Mariupol are warning the city could fall within days, if not hours. As Russia presses its offensive across eastern Ukraine, Ukrainian troops holed up in Mariupol have defied a Russian deadline to surrender. Efforts are now underway to open a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians to leave.
On Ukraine's eastern front, soldiers dig in for the fight ahead. Russia has relaunched its offensive, hoping to take full control of the Donbas region. In the besieged port city of Mariupol, the fight may be almost over. This is our appeal to the world. This could be our last appeal of our lives. We are maybe facing our last days, if not hours. The enemy outnumbers us 10 to 1. While a sense of normal life returns to the capital, Kyiv, in cities to the east, the war rages on. The intensity of fire by Russian troops in the Kharkiv direction, in Donbas and in the Dnipro region has increased significantly. They still consider ordinary housing infrastructure normal targets for them. In this war, the Russian army will forever inscribe itself in world history as perhaps the most barbaric and inhuman army in the world. At this hospital in Kramatorsk, the injured continue to arrive, wounded by this second Russian offensive. Since yesterday, Russia started a large-scale advance in the area. They use artillery systems, heavy artillery, drones and GRAD systems. In Kharkiv, families say their last goodbye to those who were killed in the fight. Russia's invasion may have entered a so-called new phase, but the pain of loss is a constant in a war that's far from over.
DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters is in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, and I asked her about evacuation efforts for civilians trapped in the city of Mariupol.
We could be witnessing, as you're reporting, the very last hours of this siege that we know has been going on for nigh on 7 weeks now, pretty much since the beginning of this war, and with a dire humanitarian catastrophe taking place there. We know that there are still around about 100,000 civilians trapped in that city, but the good news, potential good news coming out of today, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister saying that Russia and Ukraine have agreed to allow for a humanitarian corridor to allow some, we think, 6,000 people out. That is, of course, good news if it's successful, but we do know from previous attempts that, those humanitarian corridors, particularly around that city, are so treacherous and often so dangerous that they're often cancelled. So it remains to be seen whether or not that will be able to be successful and that those 6,000 people will be able to get out, but that still leaves just a little under 100,000 people trapped in that city.
All right, catastrophic situation there for civilians. What about the last Ukrainian stronghold in Mariupol? Are forces still hunkering down there?
They are. They're really defying everybody's expectations, Layla. I mean, everyone thought that Mariupol was going to fall weeks ago. There are 2 battalions fighting there, and there is still around about 2,000 to 2,500 soldiers continuing that fight, that defence for the city. They're based in the Azov steel plant, as we know, as we've been reporting, which is a vast network of warehouses, and there's also an underground tunnel system. It's believed that there are around about 1,000 civilians also sheltering in there. Now, the Russians have started to use what they're calling bunker-busting bombs, that are bombs that can go underground to try and get those remaining soldiers to come out. That would, of course, be catastrophic for the people sheltering down there as well. But at the moment, the Ukrainian soldiers have been defying these sort of surrender and die orders by Russia. Another one that was set for today at 2 p.m. has already passed. They're continuing to fight until the end. But unfortunately, it does look like the end could be nigh for Mariupol. It does look like it potentially could fall in the coming hours.
And Rebecca, what can you tell us about the Russian offensive elsewhere along the Eastern Front?
Well, that planned Russian offensive that we've been waiting for a couple of weeks did kick off yesterday. We've seen increased bombardments in the Donbass region, Kharkiv, and in the south. Some 1,200 or more than 1,200 targets even were successfully hit by Russia overnight since yesterday, and civilians have, of course, died in some of those attacks. The mayor of Luhansk says that some cities in the Donbass region are actually out without power and other utilities, and in fact, they won't be able to be restored until the end of the war. So dangerous is it that they're not able to get in to fix those things. We've seen huge evacuations from the east for the last few weeks now, but there are still civilians in those areas. Russia managing to gain control of one small city in the Donbass, but on the other side, Ukraine taking back a small city near Donetsk that had been under Russian control. Definitely expecting a lot more bombardment, missile attacks in the coming days.
DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters reporting from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Rebecca, thank you very much for your continued coverage. Early on in its invasion of Ukraine, Russia seized control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, the site of the world's worst nuclear accident. It was the first time that a nation has occupied a nuclear plant as part of its war strategy. Weeks after Moscow's forces left, reports continue to emerge of the reckless and extremely dangerous actions they took there.
This is one of the most radioactive places in the world. Yet for more than a month, Russian soldiers lived here, digging deep into the contaminated soil of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Ukrainian officials say that bunking down in the zone's so-called Red Forest may end up costing some of the troops their lives. In the Red Forest, where Russians dug trenches, they lived here, breathed in dust here, cooked their food and set fires here. So grass was burnt and they inhaled burnt substances. Of course, it will damage their health. It will kill some of them slowly, and some of them will die quickly. But Russia's occupation of this site put more than the lives of its soldiers in danger. For a time, the decommissioned plant was cut off from the power grid and forced to rely on diesel generators to keep critical safety systems running, sparking fears of a new nuclear disaster reaching well beyond Ukraine. When Russian troops hurriedly left at the end of March, they looted offices. Some reportedly even stole highly radioactive materials, possibly to sell. Ukrainian authorities are still unable to monitor radiation levels at the site, after soldiers also stole the system's main server. Chernobyl was never ready for a military occupation. With the Russians gone for now, and the anniversary of the 1986 disaster approaching, authorities are working to make sure it will be more prepared in the future.